Welcome everybody to this fantastic panel. I'm so happy to be joining you, as well as our esteemed guest, Emily Momohara.
Hello, thank you everybody for being here.
Fantastic. So with that said, it's like any other Tadaima program, we're going to ask the folks who are joining to just put into the chat box where you're joining from. You also, since the movie literally just ended about 10 minutes ago, putting in just your reactions, your love, your care, and your deep feelings towards this program. And we'll be loving to look at these throughout the experience today. With that said, folks, as you all can see on the screen, we have the director here with us joining. And before we get into talking on this panel today, thank you, Cindy Moy from Chicago, Illinois. I want to take one quick second to recognize in name the fantastic woman who was highlighted and truly made the film as is titled in big bold letters, Namba. May Namba was born May 22nd, 1922, and passed away surrounded by her loving family on April 5th, 2019. I just want to take this second before we get too far in to take a small moment together. I invite you all to take a breath with us, and as we take in this breath, to truly appreciate May for everything that she shared, and to truly appreciate Emily and May Namba for putting their efforts and all the guests into this film. So if you're ready, just centering yourself and taking a deep breath in and a deep breath out. Thank you so much, folks. I'm going to introduce you to our esteemed director with a little bio. So Emily Hanako Momohara is a mixed-race Japanese-American artist, filmmaker, educator, and activist. Momohara serves as an associate professor of studio art at the Art Academy of Cincinnati and has a robust studio practice. She claims to profess nothing but curate experiences for students to self-evaluate, problem solve, and be lifelong learners. She is dedicated to resilience-based and feminist pedagogies. Momohara's creative research centers around issues of heritage, multiculturalism, immigration, and social justice. She has exhibited internationally, most notably in the Okinawa Prefecture Art Museum and a two-person exhibition at the Japanese American National Museum titled Sugar Islands. In 2021, she was awarded a Truth and Reconciliation Grant from Artswork to finish Namba, which premiered in July at the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center. Oh my gosh, I'm so happy to be joining you today, Emily. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, I am so happy to be joining you too. Thank you for that generous introduction. And I'm going to introduce Kurt Ikeda for you today. So Kurt is a Hawaii-born and raised in the South Bay of Los Angeles. He's a Shin Nisei, second-generation Japanese-American, and a poet. He serves as the educational specialist for the Southern Idaho National Parks. So that's Critters of the Moon National Monument and Preserve, Hagerman Fossil Beds National Monument, and of course, the Minidoka National Historic Site. He is a descendant of Crystal City Camp survivors.
So, thank you, Emily. That's so very kind. And I'm so privileged talking about people named Hanako to be now on the spot where Hanako Wakatsuki, who saw in the film, is the superintendent of Honolulu. I've had the privilege to step up and be in her shoes as a director of Minidoka today. And folks, I just got an email right now from one of the stars of the film, May Namba. And May just wanted to send a quick message as well to the crowd who watched today. And if she's in the chat, I'd love for Mia just to make herself known. But she wanted to say to everybody that this is a labor of love and a testament to May and her enduring presence. And she also wanted me to say, Emily, thank you so much for helping her and learn so much about her family. So I would love to just bring her into the space. So with that said, Emily, I'm going to pass the mic to you. A chance to kind of talk about the film.
Yes. So the film is a documentary short, and it was intentionally made that length to specifically go into classrooms. I live in Cincinnati, Ohio now, even though I was born and raised in the Seattle area. And living here has really given me some insight into how the non-coastal cities, how much they know about the incarceration. And so one of the things that I'm doing with OPAL, which is Building Feminist Leadership in Ohio, is working with legislature at the state level to try to introduce mandatory curriculum changes that include folks, BIPOC folks that are other than Native American and African American, which are in the charter for the state. So my dream would be for this film to be accepted into that curriculum. And so when I was thinking about it, I thought I need to have a young person narrating the film. And I had, over the course of filming May and being in her house and looking through all of her documents, gotten close to Mia. She spent a lot of time with May. So it seemed like a natural ask. And luckily Mia said yes and was very patient over the years of allowing me to film her. And so that's kind of how the film was envisioned in that way.
Thank you, Ken Mochizuki. Right, I knew her, and I would love to see who else in this chat box has also had the privilege of meeting May. And folks, we're going to talk a lot about May and Emily and Mia and just the legacy of this film. And I would love, and we would both love to invite you all to join in. This is a director's Q&A panel, so please take this opportunity, if you wouldn't mind, to type in your questions that you have for the director, Emily Momohara, whether it be about the process, whether it be about Minidoka itself, even her personal connection, as we know, to this story as well. But just to maybe get us started, Emily, I'm going to be giving you a few questions, just kind of get us moving and let all the folks here throw in their questions for a while. And I was making a joke with Emily today because I didn't watch up until the credits. And like any good movie, you have to watch through the credits. And if you watch the credits, folks, you would remember something that Biff Brigman said in the film itself, right? Saying about halfway through that May does not want to be the center of attention. And you see that repeated at the end of the credits when she says, it was a rotten idea. I think it's a rotten idea. So, you know, Emily, as you kind of remind her that she is an extraordinary person, I wanted to ask you, could you just kind of give us an idea? What was that process like to get her to start telling this story? Can you tell us about the beginnings of this project?
Well, May has never been shy about sharing her experience at Minidoka. And so my family was not as open to that. It's painful, right? I mean, you think about many of us on the line here on YouTube here have family that was incarcerated, and it's hard for folks to talk about it. And so May was the one that actually taught me a lot about what my grandmother and my aunties and my great grandparents went through. So she had always shared her story with me. I asked her if I could start collecting her stories, and she was, May in her grumpy voice, no, you don't want, she didn't want to be on film. And so after a couple of years, we were joking around about it, and she's like, okay, you can do it. And I said, really? Because that means I'm going to come here and spend most of the summer with you. We're going to go back to Minidoka together. We're going to, you're going to get sick of me. And, and she said, oh no, it sounds like fun. I don't think she realized how elaborate the process is for making a documentary when she said yes, but she did say yes. And so we started the process. Yeah.
That's incredible. And as folks are typing in their questions here, just give us a little glimpse. I mean, how long did that process take?
Oh boy, it took 8 years. So we started filming in, I believe, 2014, and filmed a lot with May, and then went to Minidoka with her extended family, where you see that in the film. And then I started collecting interviews with other folks that were experts or family members. And I'm sorry, there are some folks that didn't make it into the final film, but that took a process, a long time. And then I moved out of the country, and I thought, oh yes, I'm going to be able to work on this full time, and it'll be great. And then, unfortunately, I was in a part of the world that was very censored, and I could not get into any national archives or get any materials. And so I kind of halted for a little bit. And when I came back, started working again. But really what helped push it over the top was getting the Arts Wave Truth and Reconciliation grant last year so that I could hire a second editor, because I realized that I could just tink around, with things and move them around for the rest of my life and never actually finish it. So I had to get a second editor on board. And then, of course, we needed to do a soundtrack as well. So really getting that grant was kind of what made it all be able to happen.
That's incredible. And we're just so thankful for all these places, right, that support the arts, specifically the intersection of art and history, and something that's so personal to both of us. So you were kind of alluding to it, would you mind kind of telling us what parts of May's life didn't make it into the film?
There's so many. One story that I think is really interesting is that May got work release right after the loyalty questionnaire, and she went to Spokane, where she was a nanny, and it was not a very enjoyable job. It was a mom whose husband was away at war and had little kids, and then she wasn't home much, and so May was taking care of the kids and cooking and cleaning. And then when she did have time on her own and she would go out into Spokane, people were not very nice to her. And she tells a story about somebody actually spitting on her on the street and calling her a dirty Jap. So she actually quit her job, which meant she had to return to Minidoka. And I don't know of anyone else who had that experience of being able to leave and then running into the kinds of problems that would make her just want to go back. Because, she was a single young woman, 19, 20 years old. She didn't have anyone to fall back on except for her family that was at Minidoka. So she went back, and it's a rare story to hear.
I appreciate you sharing that. When we think about, that post-World War II, that post-camp, we might call resettlement experience, I actually heard something very similar as well. There's a survivor, Joni Kimoto from Portland. She was a young girl in camp, and I'm not sure if May and Joni overlapped in their own lives, but when she was in Chicago, actually out in the Midwest, not exactly close to where you are, but still in that area, she experienced this deep racism she never experienced in Portland or in Minidoka. So she actually said something very similar, did something very similar, and she actually told her mom, I would like to go back to Minidoka. I want to go home.
That's so interesting, because May then ended up getting a job in Chicago. She was a secretary at the Boy Scouts. I know. And she loved it there. So that's so interesting, the different experiences, that folks can have, kind of depending on who your neighbors are, I'm sure.
Absolutely. And talking about neighbors, we have our first question from a good neighbor of ours, Julie Abo, also another Minidoka descendant. So Julie says, I wish I had met her too. What were some lessons that you learned along the way? The life lessons, the film lessons, the art process lessons. Would you mind just kind of giving us an idea of the process of what did you learn?
Well, I met May in 2001. So I had the privilege of knowing her for many years. And she really taught me about grace. I mean, she has a very witty personality, but she's also friends with everyone. She could correct you or make fun of you, or or praise you, and all of it was with love. And that's one thing that I really appreciate about her, and hope to continue to strive to do that. As far as the film goes, all of my work up until this point had been very symbolic and metaphorical, and trying to tell a linear story was a huge problem for me. I went through that. This is actually the 5th full timeline that I created. I kept going back and redoing it because I just wasn't happy with it. Because my mind, I don't think thinks in that kind of linear form. So it was really, I was surprised at how difficult it was for me to try to do that. I learned a lot in the filming process. There were things that I would definitely do different, but maybe we'll just keep those in my pocket. so nobody notices them either.
Well, I must say, I mean, to all of us who watched, and I think everybody else can agree, I mean, to some extent, this movie was so completely flawless in my eyes as a viewer. And I think folks here can also be very honest that we've seen a handful, maybe even 2 handfuls of Japanese American incarceration films, and even some things that stood out to me, Emily, just from, obviously encompassing May's experience was, the way that you had Mia filling out the loyalty questionnaire, and just even watching that experience comparatively on the side with the historic document, I found that to be such a refreshing take on a loyalty questionnaire moment. Really just seeing somebody of a younger generation, doing that. You even had her sign, right? I think she signed the date at which she did that. There was another moment when you had the propaganda pieces popping up and kind of overlaid with the marching of soldiers, just to the beat of the music that was there, this patriotic music. So I found that really just intensely wonderful. Maybe even a follow-up to that. Was there any sort of editing moments that you're like, I just really wanted to get this one scene right? Was there any scene that really kind of gave you that true satisfaction?
Well, the scene, definitely the scene with the propaganda. I knew once I did that, I was like, okay, that's staying. That one is good. And then the getting off of the bus and getting off of the, at Minidoka, but in the past and in the present, that also I felt really attached to as we were going along. There were things that came up with Mika, who was the other editor. Like, no, I got to keep that in, like the packing of the suitcase. That was really important to me, just because I feel like that experience, having a young person watching it or whoever's watching it, like think about what that would be like to, like, what would you bring with it? What is the most important objects if you could only bring what you could carry? And then, Mia talking about her, thinking about that, going, I don't know what that would be. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing. We have another audience question, and thank you so much, folks, for jumping in. We have David Fujioka. The question is, was May able to see any rough segments of the film before her passing?
She did. I believe she saw 2 versions of the film before she passed. So she did see it. One was just her and I, like the very first, very rough pass. And then a second version, which just didn't have Mia in it at all. So it was a different film. But she did see it, that version of it too.
That's fantastic. And
yeah, and
really...
I was just saying, in typical May fashion, she didn't say much. She just smiled and was like, because she doesn't want to talk about herself. So,
and it's fantastic in that, yes, she did have a chance to see that, and I'm hoping that there was moments that you got to share after the film screening for her, the rough cut draft. Was there any part that she kind of commented on? I know that you said that she just kind of was very few words in that comment, but did you see any reactions from her in those moments that really stood out to you?
When she didn't say any words about it, she just said, she said good, with a thumbs up. But the moments when she was smiling the most actually were the moments at Minidoka when she was with the grandkids. She would see them and her, them talking together, and she would smile them. At least that's to my remembrance of it. I don't know if Mia's listening to this, but maybe she could put in the chat what she remembers.
Absolutely.
Or any of the Nambas, because there was 19 Nambas on that trip.
We have a follow-up from the famous Ken Mochizuki as well. This is a follow-up to David Fujioka's question. And I would like to put a pin on the Namba family trip, because I think that would be a really great thing to talk about. But kind of on that same line, once again, Emily, we know that folks know that May was a woman of few words, but did she offer any suggestions? This is from Ken, of course. Did you offer any suggestions or have a final say in what made it into the film?
No, she didn't. She was very trusting. One thing about me that is so interesting, and I think that a lot of folks, you know, and I find myself as a professor doing this too, like, oh, you know, the youngins are thinking differently about things than I am, or, you know, but she always hung out with the young people. You know, when I met her, I was 29 and she was 81. And we, we hung out, you know, directed the pilgrimage to Minidoka together. And, she just put a lot of faith in me. You know, she's just like, I know you can do it, you know. One story, when we were talking earlier and you were asking me about stories about May, one story that I thought about was after that first pilgrimage, we had organized in 3 months the whole thing, because there was a JACL Northwest gathering. So we're like, and that was in Twin Falls. And so we were like, oh, we should pilgrimage. Actually, I think Anna Tummer, if she's on here, it was Anna's idea, but she quickly recused herself because she was part of the National Park Service and couldn't, you know. But so May and I were talking every day and multiple times a day. She was calling me at work constantly. And so like 2 days after we got back from the pilgrimage, my phone rings on the desk and I say, oh, this is Emily. This is when we had phones on our desk. And it was May. And she says, I just missed hearing your voice. And I was like, oh, I mean, yeah, she was just such a great friend and funny and sassy. So, but yeah, she just trusted me. And we just worked on things together.
There's so many words that you've used, even just thus far, and this is an invigorating talk. I just really want to appreciate you for sharing so much. You know, you talked about her grace. You talked about how she connects with this love with so many people, but trust. I believe that for all the, you know, the younger organizers or the young at heart organizers on this event today, thinking about how much trust our elder communities have put into us, I just really want to appreciate you for those words. You know, let's actually jump to the Minidoka pilgrimage. Julie Albo, I would like to follow up with a question about how was planning that pilgrimage with May? You know, what were some of those highlights from those early, you know, 2003, 2004, 5 pilgrimages?
Oh man, that's a long time ago. I remember it as being all fun. I'm sure there were some hairy moments there, though, when we were trying to get everything done. But May, in her usual role of organizing, was they had everybody mail their registrations to her home. So she had, her home was the hub, as with a lot of committees that she was on. Everything went to her. She would mail people back their receipts, and then we were, you know, putting together the packets. These were when we all did paper packets, and we met still at Bellevue Community College in the morning and loaded everything up, you know, and I remember us both kind of passing out on the bus just of exhaustion, right as we were leaving. But yeah, I don't remember any specifics, but you know, we were good friends by then, so it was it was a pleasure. Yeah.
And as friends, right, we have friends who become family. So, you know, I want to kind of follow up on that question. I mean, 19 Nambas, right? Can you tell us a little bit about that Namba family pilgrimage, that experience together?
Yeah, so I said, you know, we got to go on a pilgrimage and film, you know, and I was like, well, why don't you bring the grandkids and the family? And she had brought her, you know, at various different pilgrimages, different family members had come with her. But once the word got out, it was, you know, she has 5 boys, and so they have kids, and then, you know, so it was her immediate family as well as nieces and nephews, and you know, so it just became a quite large extended family. And they wore those t-shirts that say kicking ass since 1922, and it has her picture on it. And yeah, it was amazing. It was like her groupies, right?
Kicking ass since 1922. I think we're allowed to say that on a Tadaima video. Actually, Emily, you just reminded me of something. I mean, 1922, this year, right? It's 2022 would have been 100 years. And
That
as we
is
kind of think
true.
about such huge numbers, right, and such just monumental people,
Hmm.
I think I'm answering because we have some great comments in the comment section too. Just really hearing all the wonderful love and folks who say, "I wish I knew her. I wish I had a chance to meet her." John Tona, I was so fortunate to meet her at Minidoka.
Hmm.
She really sounds like a person who will
Yeah.
continue to live on in all of us. Do you feel that way too?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Hi, John. Yeah, she was definitely one of those leaders in the community that was uh, not the kind of person that usually was at the podium, but she was the kind of person that was doing a lot. So if you had any questions, you would go to her with it, right? Because she knew everything that was happening at any one event. So I think we all got to know her and appreciate her, and some of us even got to spend a lot of time with her being mentored. So
Absolutely. Kind of going back to the technical aspect of your work, since you did spend so much
mhm.
time with May, during those 8 years, as you said, of this project, Ken Mochizuki wanted to ask you, what was your shooting ratio? How much of what you shot actually made it into the final version?
Not much. I had a lot of footage. I had a lot of footage. I had some other interviews with different family members and different experts as well that didn't make it in. I, yeah. So, when I started out, I really didn't know what the finished product was going to be. So I was just filming as much as I could. And then once I started to get an idea of what it was, then I was like, okay, then I need to fly back to Minidoka and get these different scenes, etc. So a ratio, I'm maybe like 1 to 10. One made it in and 10 did not. Which is why it was so difficult, right? There's a million different stories that could have been told, and like, how do you figure out which ones are the most important? And I did have some wonderful people that sat on a panel: Roger Shimamura, Biff Brigman, Bill Tashima, Anna Tamura, Hilary Namba came a few times to look at some of the edits to help me out with that part.
What I'm hearing from you is this is truly a community undertaking. Once again, 1 out of 10 of those shots made it. Ken Mochizuki obviously looking for a baseball stat here for this event. And I think this is actually a great segue to Mary Abo, wonderful, wonderful Mary Abo, Minidoka survivor. Because since he had so much film left kind of on the cutting room floor, she wants to
Mhm.
know, how will you use this film in classrooms?
Well, the film, what I would like to have happen is that the film, in as you all saw it, would be to have it be housed somewhere where it could be streamed and any teachers could come and just use it in their classroom. I would love for there to be some curriculum associated with it as well. Maybe going through some of the questions that Mia was asking herself, and she said, "Oh, the year I turned 20, I realized this was how old grandma was when all of this happened to her." And maybe, having the students reflect on some of those questions, filling out the form themselves, the loyalty questionnaire, thinking about what to pack, those kinds of questions. I would love to have some curriculum that goes alongside of it.
Absolutely. I think that's such a
Yeah.
powerful portion. And maybe this is a little follow up to that too. You talked a little bit earlier about working with May Namba, and I mean, you also got to see her. I'm assuming, grow in this time frame too, right? Could you tell us, a little bit about just what was it like for you to see not just May, not just Mia, but the two of them interacting? Was there any sort of moments that really stand out to you?
Oh man, they were BFFs. They were they were two peas in a pod. Yeah, I mean, you probably noticed in the film that Mia's hair changes every time I would go back and film her, right? So one time it was blonde too, and that's when we were doing the filming in the horse stalls and stuff. We're like, oh, can we, tie it back or figure out how to make this look a little more like the other footage? Um, Yeah, Mia was in high school at that pilgrimage that we all went to, and she just graduated college. So, which congratulations to Mia. I guess that was last year, but so yeah, she's grown a lot. And her and May have, the relationship probably started out with May, both of them wanting to kind of take care of each other, and then as it goes on, Mia doing more of the care than May was doing the care of Mia, right? Those roles reverse, but they are very close, as she is with her grandkids. I mean, those are just, her grandkids were her favorite part of life, I think. So.
And for those folks who joined us in the 2019 pilgrimage, after May's passing, I just remember a very tender moment that I had to share with Alex Namba as well, and I really cherished that moment together. You could tell the turf club right in Twin Falls, Idaho, you can really feel how special she was to everybody. And just kind of on that note about Mia and getting the horse stall, Sheila Newlands wanted to add, thank you so much for those scenes of Puyallup / Camp Harmony. There's not too many film pieces of Camp Harmony that folks see. What was that process like to get there to Puyallup and that filming?
Yeah, well, a lot of those were photographs, and then some of them, I can't remember if we had historic footage of Puyallup. That might have been Minidoka. I'm sorry, I can't answer that specifically, but most of those came from the Library of Congress or National Archives. And it's interesting because they have, when I first went to National Archives, before this film was even conceived of in 2006, they didn't have a lot of that digitized already, but they have so much more. So it was like constantly going back and finding new images as they're continuing to digitize the old records. So that was pretty wonderful to come across. Oh wow, look at this image. For a while I couldn't find the right potbelly stove image. It was like, and then over the years, just revisiting and finding, okay, this is the right one that I wanted. And so it was really fun. I'm interested in history anyways. I've been part of the Friends of Minidoka and the JCL, and I actually have a BA in art history as well. So I've always been kind of interested in history, and then especially something as close to me as Minidoka, because my family was incarcerated there as well. So.
I know Cindy Moy has been waiting to ask this question because I think it's the perfect segue. Because Emily Momohara, folks know you. You are synonymous, right, with the founding of Minidoka, of the pilgrimage itself. You really are a legacy of the site. So I think Cindy's question is really well asked here. She asks, can you share some of your insights that you have learned by living in Ohio versus growing up on the West Coast in terms of the attitudes or education regarding the Japanese American incarceration?
Mm-hmm. That's a really good question. I wonder, is Cindy Moy related to Linda Moy? Linda Moy is one of my friends in Ohio. Yes, it's been. I don't think the film would have turned out the way it did if I didn't live in Ohio. Growing up, I definitely took for granted the community, the Nikkei community, just being so available. And then moving to Ohio, there is a JCL in Cincinnati. It's a very small chapter. There has been a recent push to do a lot more combined AAPI events here in Cincinnati, which is amazing, because when I first moved here, there was nothing. And now there's, actually a consortium that meets quarterly, and, it's really great. But I think one thing that I've learned is that, in Seattle, we kind of siloed ourselves: Japanese Americans, Chinese Americans, Vietnamese Americans, Filipino Americans, right? And here in Ohio, we really we stick together as AAPI American, So just finding that there can be solidarity even amongst our differences, and realizing the reason why that category is even there is for power, the power of the masses, and the numbers of us coming together. So I think that's one thing that I really learned about being in Ohio. For the most part, nobody knows about the incarceration. It's not part of the curriculum. Most people that I meet have never heard of the story. So it's important for me to speak about it and to get it out in the work that I make so that people can learn more.
I think about the premiere, right, in the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center. Well, what a very specific place to premiere that. And I actually kind of want to ask you a little bit about that premiere and any sort of comments that you get from your Midwest colleagues about the film. Obviously, you're joined here by so many Nikkei friends and family, but tell us about that July premiere.
Oh, wow, it was so overwhelming. The film was like finished 2 days before, so there was that, and then the Freedom Center. I originally Artworks wanted to showcase all of their grantees at the art museum, and the previous year that they had done grants, it had been at the Freedom Center, and I was like, oh, I want to be at the Freedom Center. I don't want to be at the art museum. This is very important. This film is about incarceration. It needs to be at the Freedom Center. And so they reached out and made an exception for myself and one other person. And so it was a dance performance. So that person did theirs, and then I was able to show my film. And then my mother-in-law graciously hosted a reception afterwards at a nearby restaurant. And it was really overwhelming. It was a full crowd. I thought maybe it would just be like my parents and a few friends, but it was quite full, and it was just so wonderful to actually share it after working on it for that long with people. And of course, a lot of the folks there had not heard the story and hadn't heard it firsthand like that, out of an individual person telling the story. So I think people were kind of surprised and a little shocked. And there were some tears,
As I bet there was definitely tears being shed, while the film was being watched. I think about the scene with Hanako Wakatsuki, right, and just kind of her reflection of just the importance of May in her life, being the person who kind of took that courageous step. She says that she's not extraordinary, but she really is. And talking about this extraordinary woman, I want to bring the conversation back to her. When you were on that trip, a lot of folks are asking about pilgrimage, so we'll kind of get to those questions in a second. But when you were on that trip, with May filming, when she returned to Minidoka, was there any part of Minidoka that evoked a lot of emotions for her? Was there anything that she specifically, when she was there walking around, stood out to her?
She was so happy. She had like all of her grandkids, even like one flew up from California, and all the grandkids. There's a scene where they're in the mess hall. She's sitting down and they're all kind of huddled around her, right? And all taking care of her, making sure she had everything she needed. And for her, I think it was a culmination of a lot of work that she had done in the past, and then having her family there to celebrate with her. She was, as far as I could see, and I would love to know what some of the other Nambas thought, I think she was pretty happy at having all of her family there to do something so sacred like the pilgrimage. Yeah.
It's like exactly what Kimiko Mara was going to follow up with her question, and I think you've already answered the first part, but since we have the question, I think we'd all love to hear, as you said, you talked about what you think the pilgrimage meant to May. But maybe the second question, what does the pilgrimage mean to the both of you, or to you directly?
Yeah, and I want to say I am purely speculating on what May thought, because when she thought something was positive, it would just be like good, when she didn't share a lot of the more emotional parts, or rarely, I should say, there sometimes. For me, I was those people who are filmmakers or photographers who are listening, you'll know that when you're in the moment and you're trying to get the right angle on something or the right perspective, or move around somebody else, I wasn't really thinking about my feelings. I was really just thinking about how to get what I wanted out of the scene. I think afterwards being, well, that's not true. When I got up several of the mornings early and went out to the site to get the sunrise. I thought I would use it. That's more footage that I didn't use. Or like the footage of those birds in the afternoon at the end of the film where they take off in flight. I'm just sitting there getting minutes after minutes of footage with different frames and stuff. And so then at that point, I could kind of reflect a little bit when I'm doing those elongated pieces of footage. Being there, being at Minidoka is always a contemplative thing. When you have a moment, when I have a moment to sit and think on it, that spot right there, I kind of know where my family's barrack would have been, and it would have been out past that hospital building. And I look out there and I think about the life that they might have led there. There's really no resolution to it. It's just more of a wondering and maybe a feeling, giving homage, to the folks that went through that and then came out and rebuilt, our family's lives so that I could be so prosperous, now.
It reminds me of that quote, we are our ancestors' wildest dreams, right? And I feel like that, even the fact that you have the opportunity to get to know the Nambas so well, to get to know May so well, I think a lot of us folks who continue to do the work, myself included, just feel so, if we could just have that conversation 2 generations behind. But with that said, you had that with May. And I think Sheila Newland's kind of getting to the question. I'm not sure if it's directed to both you and I, but I think I'm going to ask it anyway. Do you have plans, Emily? Will this be shown at the next Minidoka pilgrimage?
This I do not know. I am right now applying for film festivals. So I really would like for some PBS or some other kind of documentary archive to pick it up so that it can be housed somewhere and people can have access to it. So I'm going to do the film festival circuit. That's how you kind of shop it around. And that's what I'm kind of working on right now. I don't know that the Minidoka pilgrimage, Kurt, do you know, have plans started for next year yet? That's probably a good question for you.
I'm going to allow the Minidoka Pilgrimage Committee, who may be watching on this, to present that when they are ready. And that's the best federal government answer I could possibly give. So if you have any friends in the Minidoka Pilgrimage Committee, just send them your best vibes as they work very hard to hopefully provide something special for us sometime soon. With that said, and talking about somebody who maybe this kind of goes into our activity, because there's a small activity, folks who are joining, so don't go away, that Emily and I would like to kind of present. But talking about folks who are thinking about the next generation, thinking about the work that they do. I have Kevin Moy joining us, a former intern of Minidoka National Historic Site. And I just wanted to ask you, will you use the other stories that weren't in the film as maybe shorts or some kind of educational learnings?
That's a really good question. I don't know. I don't think I've thought that far. But I am, the Nambas have asked for all the footage, and so we'll have to figure out, there's a lot of it, so we'll have to figure out some kind of way to, maybe it has to be on a hard drive to give them all the footage. But other than that, I don't know. I don't have any plans, but that doesn't mean it's not going to happen.
Well, that's a great question, Kevin. I should say so myself as your former supervisor. Folks, I want to give this opportunity before we kind of wrap up, because we will have a small wrap up at the end, to actually give the mic back to Emily, as she would like to engage you all in a small activity kind of collectively right now.
So one of my hopes for the film is that when it's shown, especially to young folks, but to whoever, takes the time to watch it, is for them to be inspired by May's desire to give back, right? To to be, I don't think she would have called herself an activist or an organizer, but really she was, because of the work that she did, even though she wasn't out there, leading a march or something, being in the limelight, right? So I guess my question would be, what are you inspired to do in your life that gives back to community? If the incarceration is part of your family's legacy, what are ways in which you would like to give back in that sense? And Kurt, I think of you and the role that you play at Minidoka, and I think, wow, that's like, can you get any better than that? That's a really good answer. But I would love to hear what other people are thinking about, organizing and giving back and, standing up, speaking up. Yeah.
So maybe to repeat the question for the folks joining us at home, and please type this into the chat box. I'd love to read this out loud for you. Once again, taking this story, how are you going to give back? What have you done to give back, to speak out, to speak up? And I'm going to start this off with the wonderful Julie Avo, descendant of Minidoka. She says she's going to volunteer for Minidoka. And that's awesome. I'll even add this. I'm not sure if May Namba is joining us, but there was a conversation last year about potentially asking one of the Nambas to consider coming to Minidoka to do some more service, maybe in some sort of capacity of work as well in the future. Folks, how else are you going to be trying to continue to push May's legacy? What are you doing or will you do to give back, to speak up, to speak out? We would love to hear some more answers. And maybe while we're looking for more answers, Emily, I believe you've asked this question to some folks in your crowd as well. What are some of the answers that you've heard around your experiences?
Yeah, it's interesting living in the Midwest, and when you think about AAPI history or the AAPI situation, I think a lot of people think about supporting each other, being there for each other. There have been, a decent amount of anti-Asian instances and people wanting to be more supportive and to build community. So I think that's something that people talk about. And then just not being afraid to speak up if you see something. Sometimes we let the fear of stepping into someone else's business maybe keep us from doing something. But if you feel compassion for someone, it's never a bad thing to say so, right? So I think those are two that come up quite a bit. I think some people have said they're going to tell other folks to watch the movie. So some people have said that they're going to talk to their friends, especially, in Ohio, folks that had never heard about the incarceration. They'll say, I'm going to tell other people about this because I don't think, my friends know either. So those are some of the things I've heard.
Absolutely. And I agree, Cindy Moy. Well said, Emily. I think about that Dr. Frank Kitamoto quote, right? This isn't just a Japanese-American story, but it's an American story with implications for the world. When someone responds, I'm going to tell somebody else. I love that. And here's some more comments. Mary Abo, she's going to volunteer and work as part of the Japanese-American community, the Bainbridge Island Japanese-American community. We have Kimiko, just one big word, tadaima, right? Tadaima, continuing the work. Nori is going to continue to share these powerful American stories. Mary continues consulting parties against Magic Valley Energy's plans to build 400 wind turbines, 700 feet high within the site of Minidoka. She says we need to protect the sanctity of the site. Just clarifying, I was reading Mary Albo's specific comment there. Kevin Moy, I will learn more about my Japanese heritage and I'll share about my internship experience at Minidoka. James Okamura, I'm going to document photos. I'm going to write stories, researching genealogy, all with the intent to share with others. All the Issei and Nisei family are almost gone. The Sansei like me are getting old. Thank you, James. We have Ken Mochizuki, like you both, Emily and Kurt, this subject has been a good part of my life. 2 camp books due out within the next few months. Another in the works.
Great.
James continues. James wants to volunteer with Tule Lake Pilgrimage 2023. So I hope folks are listening to that as well. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, for engaging, for commenting. Emily, as we're kind of wrapping up here, are there any other announcements that you really want to make to the crowd who might be interested? Maybe the what's next question.
Yeah, just be on the lookout. Hopefully, Namba will be accepted into some of these film festivals that happen in the spring. And then if that's the case, tell your friends to come.
Absolutely. And I think you have a whole crew of people behind you who have your back. I know that the Tadaima crew is going to be typing in the website so you can access and learn more about the Namba film. I believe it is namba-movie.com is probably one of those websites as well. Thank you so much, folks at Jamf, for popping that in there. James says, thank you so much for the film and presentation. Arigatou gozaimasu. Just so much love in this community space. So as we're wrapping up, is there a website for the film? Yep, Juliabo, there is. Please follow this on Instagram at Namba Movie. Yes. Anything else, Emily, that you want to kind of throw in?
I want to thank you, Kurt. Thank you. You've done such a great job managing all these questions that are happening here and trying to keep me on track. So I really appreciate you, being here and talking through this. I mean, you don't get more of an expert on Minidoka than the, chief of interpretation, right? So, or director, right? Director. We want to make sure we have the language to reflect. Yes.
Emily, that's very kind. I greatly appreciate it. And I want to maybe just add that the expert on Minidoka are the folks who bravely shared those stories, right? Like me, and just how privileged you and I and everybody who's joining us to have listened to them, and how appreciative we are of you and the Namba family for documenting them. I just want to read off one really great comment. And I think this is a great way to kind of get us moving towards the end here. Cindy Moy, she says, Emily, thank you for bringing May's story to us. I felt a little of my mom's presence as May talked. What a wonderful, moving story. So with that, folks, I'm going to just correct one thing I misspoke. I misspoke earlier. May Namba passed away on April the 6th, 2019. So my sincerest apologies on that. And folks who do remember her, she's always living inside of us. So to finish us off, folks, I'm just going to say, if you wouldn't mind taking a moment to once again breathe in, to breathe out, as we take one last second to truly remember activist, organizer, grandmother, and inspiration, May Namba, kicking ass since 1922. Thank you so much for joining us, folks. Emily, thank you so much, and continue to watch all the awesome Tadaima programming throughout this week. So excited for more Tadaima content. Thank you, everybody.